Napoleon Bonaparte is a name that stands at a crossroads of innovation and tyranny, of enlightenment and darkness. In today's video, we take you through the life of this enigmatic figure whose shadow still looms over the tapestry of history. Facts First presents the dark, true story of the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte. The Corsican Outsider. In the rugged hills of Corsica, amidst the turmoil of a land struggling under Genoese rule, Napoleon Bonaparte was born in 1767, just months after the island was ceded to France. From the outset, his life was steeped in conflict and a sense of otherness. He was a child of a conquered land, and this early brush with political strife planted seeds of relentless ambition in young Napoleon. As a boy, he was sent to school in mainland France, where his Corsican accent and modest means made him an easy target for ridicule. But within this crucible of early adversity, Napoleon's resolve only hardened. He immersed himself in history, drawing inspiration from the tales of great leaders and empires of the past. But even as he excelled in his military studies, a darkness grew within him, a burning desire to rise above his station at any cost. The Whiff of Gunpowder. His military career began with a bang, the literal bang of cannons and the roar of revolution. As the French Revolution tore through the nation, he aligned himself with the revolutionaries, quickly making a name for himself with his bold artillery tactics. But the revolution was a beast that devoured its own, and his rise was a treacherous path. In the smoke-filled streets of Toulon, as royalist forces clashed with the revolutionaries, Napoleon's strategic brilliance shined through. His daring assault reclaimed the city for the revolution, but it was one marked by bloodshed. The dark side of his genius was becoming apparent. He was a man who could calculate loss without a flinch as long as it led to victory. The Italian Campaign. By 1796, Napoleon had married Josephine de Beauharnais and was appointed to lead the French army in Italy. Here he conducted a campaign that was as much a masterpiece of strategy as it was a symphony of shadow. The Italian campaign showcased Napoleon's military prowess, as he outmaneuvered and outsmarted his enemies, often engaging in deceptive tactics and psychological warfare. He painted himself as a liberator, but for many, his arrival heralded oppression and exploitation. His forces plundered resources and extorted money, leaving a trail of suffering in their wake. The Egyptian Venture. His ambition was not content with Europe, he wanted a wider stage. In 1798, he embarked on the Egyptian Campaign, a grandiose venture looking to undermine British influence and establish French dominance in the East. His campaign was marked by the slaughter at the Battle of the Pyramids, where Napoleon's forces decimated the Mamluk army. The streets of Cairo ran red, and the dark heart of Napoleon's quest for power was laid bare. It was a conquest with a veneer of scientific and cultural advancement, yet underpinned by a ruthless pursuit of personal glory. The Syrian Campaign. The march into Syria from Egypt was a brutal affair. Siege warfare, starvation, and disease stalked Napoleon's troops. The siege of Acre, in particular, was a gruesome episode where the cost of Napoleon's ambition was paid in the lives of his soldiers and the innocent. It was here that the darker aspects of his character were starkly revealed. When plague struck his troops, he considered a chilling solution, poisoning the sick. Although he abandoned this grim plan, the very contemplation of such an act cast a long shadow over his legacy. The campaign ultimately failed, and Napoleon slipped back to France, leaving his army behind. The Consulate. Back in France, the political landscape was ripe for manipulation. The Directory, the government of the new French Republic, was floundering. Napoleon, with his eye ever on the main chance, positioned himself at the center of a coup that would overthrow the Directory and establish the Consulate, with him as the first consul, in effect, the ruler of France. This period was marked by a series of reforms that modernized France, but it was also a time when Napoleon began to weave a web of censorship, secret police, and political machinations. He consolidated power with ruthless efficiency, silencing dissent and steering France with an iron hand cloaked in velvet. The Emperor's Shadow. In 1804, the first consul orchestrated his most audacious maneuver yet. He crowned himself Emperor of the French. It was a masterstroke of political theater, signaling the end of the French Republic in all but name. As Emperor, Napoleon's grip on power seemed unshakable, but the darkness within his regime grew ever more pronounced. Under the splendor of his court, a culture of fear and suspicion flourished. His secret police, led by the notorious Joseph Fouché, cast a wide net to quell any hint of opposition. The press was muzzled, and the letters of citizens were opened and read. It was an era where trust was a luxury, and betrayal could be found even within one's own family. The Continental Stranglehold. Napoleon's ambition knew no bounds, and his desire to dominate Europe led to the Continental System, an economic blockade against Britain designed to cripple its trade. But this policy cast a dark pall over Europe, causing widespread economic distress. The period also was marked by the brutal Peninsular War in Spain, which became a quagmire for French troops. The war was characterized by fierce guerrilla resistance and was a precursor to modern warfare's savagery. It was a conflict that saw atrocities committed on both sides, further tarnishing Napoleon's legacy. The Russian Catastrophe. In 1812, Napoleon embarked on the ill-fated invasion of Russia, a decision driven by hubris and the desire to enforce the continental system. The campaign was a disaster of epic proportions. The Russian winter proved merciless, and the scorched earth tactics employed by the retreating Russians left the Grande Armée starving and exposed. The retreat from Moscow was a harrowing ordeal, a march through a frozen hell that decimated Napoleon's forces. It was a stark revelation of the human cost of his overreaching ambition, a grim spectacle of suffering and death that would haunt the collective memory of Europe. Napoleon's fall from grace. The debacle in Russia marked the beginning of the end for Napoleon. The nations of Europe, sensing weakness, formed a coalition that eventually brought him down. In 1814, after a series of defeats, Paris fell, and Napoleon was forced to abdicate. Exiled to the island of Elba, he was a shadow of the colossus that once bestrode the world. But even in exile, the darkness within him stirred, and in 1815, he escaped and returned to France for a final gamble. The 100 Days. It was a brief resurgence that would culminate in the Battle of Waterloo, a crushing defeat that ended his reign and his freedom. The legacy of shadows. Napoleon's final years were spent in exile on the remote island of St. Helena, where he had time to reflect on his life and deeds. He died in 1821, leaving behind a complex legacy. His legal reforms, the Napoleonic Code, endure to this day, but so do the memories of his wars, which cost millions of lives. Now it's time to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Napoleon's legacy? Do you see him as a visionary hero or a tyrant led astray by his own ambition? Let us know in the comments section below.